Well, let's go live now to activist, scholar and writer Molaodi Sekake in neighbouring South Africa for his take. You're very welcome to the programme. Yeah, what do you make of what's happening, what's unfolding in Mozambique? Is an already bad humanitarian situation there becoming considerably more serious, worsening as a result of the insurgency?
Thank you very much. It is actually getting worse in Mozambique, especially on the northern part of the country called Cabo Delgado. That is where things are happening and tensions are not only simmering but are very high. But what I just want to say is that we must not understand what is going on in Mozambique, in that part of the province, outside of the capitalist imperialist attempts to undermine the sovereignty of African countries, especially in this case, Mozambique. We could remember that in 2009 there was a discovery of oil and gas, and a French oil and gas company, Total, invested a tune of 20 billion euros. So France is going to have an interest, not only it will not only intervene on the basis of bettering the well-being of Mozambicans. Rather, it is looking for its own interest and also to exploit the natural resources for its own good. So whatever it does it for its own good, not for the good of Mozambicans.
But France says it's going to come in and help. Paris says we want to go there and assist. But I would imagine local authorities would say, well, look what happened a little bit further north in Africa, in Mali. You were there for 9 years, and the situation, they say, is worsened.
But also, we must locate our analysis, in history. We know, the legacies of France, the US, Portugal, and many other colonial countries. Countries that colonized, the so-called global South. They have never meant it in good faith when they say they will intervene. It has always been on the basis of what they are going to get out of Africa, on the basis of what they are going to get out of, countries that are endowed with natural resources. It has never been, a fair game, especially at the level of global trade and all those things. And military interventions have always come when the logic of capitalism and of making profit does not find expression. So it has never been in the best interest of the countries of the global South. It is never going to be in the best interest of Mozambique for France to intervene. It will safeguard its investment because it wants dividends, and it will at all costs make it a point that it extracts resources. And if you check, the so-called Islamic militants are actually people who were misplaced when these multinational companies explore to extract these natural resources. They are unemployed young people. They are people who were dispossessed or never given an opportunity to continue living.
But nevertheless, the atrocities that they're committing, they are heinous, aren't they? We're talking about beheading Christians and moderate Muslims. They're very much the target as well. What can the country do in the immediate term to stop that happening and stop it spreading? You're in South Africa. Is there a fear that it could go over the border or spread to the north as well?
Exactly. It has started to spread to other areas of the country, like the province of Nyasa, But what the country has to do is to politically consolidate itself and, be reluctant to call for external intervention. But also, it has to work, hand in hand with regional bodies. For example, SADC, so that we have a united, consolidated regional political bloc that is going to be willing to solve problems without seeking external, help. Because we know the history of external help. It has not always been in the best interest of our countries in Africa, and it will never be in the best interest of Mozambique. So that is we need a solid political bloc that is going to be willing to solve the crisis that is going on outside of the logic of capitalist imperialism and outside of the logic of having to extract African resources so that they go to Western Europe in particular.
And just on that help that you mentioned, has Mozambique received help from perhaps other African nations to tackle the insurgency? That's something we don't hear a lot about in the West.
It's because the truth of the matter is that Mozambique has been reluctant. You know, the political powers that be have been very reluctant to seek external help, especially from regional bodies and regional countries. You know, the major, you know, powerhouse in the region, South Africa, there has never been a clear-cut solution to say, here is the problem we are facing, you know, and this is how we hope we can work out a solution that is going to represent the best interest of the region in general, but also the best interest of Mozambicans who are displaced from their communities and who are refused any form of livelihood outside of the logic of capitalist imperialism that is actually perpetuated by France and the rest.
Molaodi, one other aspect, just to touch upon briefly, if you would. The country's interior minister, Mozambique that is, has accused some police officers of supporting terror groups. Quite an accusation. To what extent is corruption a serious issue in Mozambique, and what do you see being done to tackle it, if anything?
I think what I've said about creating a political imagination and a political bloc, corruption is bound to be a reality, especially when the country's sovereignty is undermined and the political leadership is not seen to be doing anything. There are people who are going to be, you know, the colonial strategy of divide and rule. There are people, sovereign subjects, who are going to be won over on the other side at the expense of national sovereignty and at the expense of national development. So I wouldn't even blame the interior minister for raising such concerns and saying some of the police personnel are part of a process that seeks to undermine the sovereignty of the country, because what the external forces are going to do, they will use some of the Mozambican citizens, you know, to pursue their agenda, so that at some point it is not seen as everyone in Mozambique is going to suffer. Rather, certain people are refusing the notion of development, which is actually defined by Western forces, and in this case by France.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on the program and sharing your thoughts with us. Live from Johannesburg, activist, scholar and writer Molaodi Sekake.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.